When it comes to Jojos, one of its biggest appeals is its fights, as both the anime and manga have some of the most engaging, creative, tactical and epic fights in anime and manga history, especially when it comes to part 5. So because of this, I've decided that I'm going to be ranking every single fight in this part. The presentation, creativity, emotional impact and overall cool factor will all be a part of the criteria for the ranking of all these fights. So to start off, let's take a look at the worst fight of part 5 that also takes the 18th spot on this list. For all those who may not remember, in the beginning of part 5, Jono runs into leaky-eyed Luca, who is a thug that comes after him for not paying him any share of the money that he makes at the Napoli airport, which would later result in Luca's own demise. Now this fight is really brief and only really functions to show a major glimpse of Jono's ability and his connection to Dio, along with a glimpse of his character as we see Jono's demeanor transition from polite and patient, cold and uncaring due to Luca's aggression. And while all of this is really cool to see due to its short length and impact on story, it holds the lowest spot on the list. Holding the 17th spot on this list, we have Jono vs Koichi, a fight that is also very short and pretty one-sided. Koichi gets in a decent hit on Jono with Echo's Act 3, but Jono quickly turns the tables without much effort thanks to one of his Gold Experience's passive abilities. The tension is slightly higher here because we know that Koichi is a veteran stand user from part 4, so that reason alone just barely puts it above the Luca fight for me. Coming in at number 16, we have Mr. vs Sale, which is not only more of a fully fledged fight unlike the ones that we've ranked so far, but it's also our first real one-on-one showdown that does a great job of showcasing Mr's stand Sex Pistols, as Jono doesn't really do anything besides becoming a catalyst for this conflict to commence. The conflict between Mr. and Sale's stand abilities is intense and clever, and the dialogue during this fight is very enjoyable too, but the pacing can drag at times, and also the ending, while funny, also felt a bit anticlimactic to me because of how Sale was defeated. Definitely not a great fight by any means, but still a very good one nonetheless, unlike the previous two. Next up, we have Diavolo vs Polnareff, which is another short-lived fight but also a very impactful one that serves as more of a prelude to the final fight, as Diavolo revealing himself to Polnareff would become the major catalyst for everything to come shortly after. Also, I really loved the creativity that's present in this fight, as you have Polnareff who uses the number of blood droplets from his finger to detect when time had skipped to deal with Diavolo, who in turn uses his blood as well to blind Polnareff during the time skip so he could successfully finish him off after time resumes, only to be foiled by Chariot's fated ascension into a Requiem stand thanks to Polnareff's noble sacrifice. Overall, the story and emotional impact, presentation and little amount of creativity that this fight has is enough to put it above the previous fight for me despite its short length. From this point forward, we are finally starting to ascend from the good fights of part 5 to the truly amazing ones, starting off with Jono vs Bruno Bucciarati, which is the first major fight of the story, and it's an epic one for sure thanks to the creative use of both Sticky Fingers and Gold Experience's abilities, along with the high stakes and tension that builds up throughout the fight the more that it goes on. This fight is also a great introduction to Bucciarati's character, and I love how it delves into the emotional backstory of Jono Giovanna as it further deepens his character and explains his motivations. This fight was great in the manga, but the anime adaptation took it to the next level with stunning animation, use of dynamic colors, additional scenes and exceptional presentation. Taking the 13th spot on this list is Popo's Black Sabbath vs Jojo, with the assistance of Koichi, which in the anime already surpasses the last fight just by its cinematography, art direction, use of dynamic colors and animation alone, but also the mystery of Black Sabbath's weakness and the teamwork that it took between Jojo and Koichi to take him down is what makes this fight so interesting and entertaining, due to Black Sabbath being a remote controlled stand that Jojo and Koichi have to figure out and defeat before the sun sets. Also, the way Jojo has Popo shot and killed to get rid of Black Sabbath for good was the icing on the cake for me. Now next we have Gyacho vs Mr. and Jojo. This fight is a roller coaster ride, starting with a car chase, escalating into pure combat in the beautiful waters of Venice, and then later into a final square off in front of the broken lion statue at the Venice train station, with the square off at the end being the best part of this fight by far, thanks to the incredibly consistent and fluid animation. Gyacho's relentless attacks on Mr. and Jojo keep them on edge throughout the entire fight, almost intensifying it from start to finish. And I say almost because the pacing in this fight does feel a bit slow at times, and the use of each stand in this fight isn't very interesting either a lot of the times, but the character development for Jojo and Mr. was great to see, as they both come to understand what it truly means to have resolve, which is to keep pushing forward even when things become far too hopeless, and the ending complements this growth in an amazingly epic fashion. Holding the 11th spot, we have Mario Zuchiro vs Bucciarati and Abbacchio, with assistance from Jojo. A very unique fight that serves as more of a intense but fun investigation into Zuchiro's standability with the use of sticky fingers, and especially Abbacchio's stand, Moody Blues, due to its ability to replay past events. Jojo's influence and assists are also major highlights of this fight, as not only is it thanks to him that Bucciarati and Abbacchio are able to commence their investigation, but to also get the victory in the end, as we see Bruno defeat Zuchiro in a manner that is very similar to how Jojo almost beat Bruno in their first fight. Also, the high stakes of Team Bucciarati being stranded in the middle of the ocean added a lot of tension to this fight. My only complaint about it is that I felt Abbacchio's backstory was shown a bit too early in the anime, and that they should have saved it for later, but other than that, this fight was top tier. Breaking into the top 10 of this list, we have Naranjo vs Formaggio, which starts off with a bang. The two backstories introducing us to both the Hitman team and Naranjo's past are both great additions to it, especially when it comes to Naranjo, who I really love as a character, and I really like how David Pro showed the Hitman characters early in the anime instead of hiding them like Araki did in the manga to help strengthen their characters and motivations. The fight itself is definitely more of a chase for the most part, as Naranjo has to use Aerosmith to hunt down Formaggio, while the latter waits for his stand's ability Little Feet to take effect, but it's still a very intense and fun fight regardless, where the two are always outsmarting each other to get an edge in the fight, and the end phase of this fight is top tier, especially in the anime. Next fight on the list is Eluso vs Jojo, Abbacchio and Fugo. I really loved how these three characters bounced off each other to get the key and victory over Eluso. Despite not actively working together as a team the entire time, Fugo was stuck in the mirror with not much that he could do, while Jojo and Abbacchio had conflicting ideas on how to deal with the situation. Honestly, nothing but great dynamics and dialogue between all the characters, especially especially when Illuso's involved, because I find him to be such a cocky but enjoyable antagonist, and seeing him get outsmarted and outplayed by the trio throughout the fight, to later seeing his defeat at the hands of Purple Haze was really satisfying. The sound and visual design went hard as usual, but what stuck out to me the most were the stand rush animations for both Moody Blues and Purple Haze, as they both looked amazing. Also, I really love the original backstory for Fugo in the anime. It was a great inclusion to this fight, and it was also really nice to see him and the Bakio warm up to Jono by the end of the fight as well. Next up we have Jono vs Melone's Babyface, a remote controlled stand that can turn people into objects, which is a parallel of Gold Experience's ability to create life, and because of this duality, Jono grows as a character and a stand user thanks to his near-death experience at the start of the fight, a near-death experience that always does a good job of making Babyface such a big threat from the beginning, with the way it easily dispatches both Jono and Bruno in a manner which I found to be very intense every time I rewatch this fight. I really loved the creative use of both stands during the fight, as Jono and Babyface trash talk each other, which is very funny and enjoyable in of itself. It was like watching a fast-paced chess game but in the form of a stand fight instead, which was very cool, and the way Jono has Babyface blow itself up was a really cool way to end the fight. Melone was also very fun to watch too during the fight, and the way Jono killed him with the snake was very sick too. I also think the anime took this fight to the next level with the amazing visual design that is probably the best that the anime has ever looked. Next spot on the list we have Squalo and Tiziano vs Narancia with the assistance of Jono, a fight with a lot of high stakes to it, especially because Narancia has to kill the duo within a given time frame, as it would otherwise result in Jono's death, and for being the weakest members of Diavolo's elite guard, Squalo and Tiziano's stands do a great job of coming off as powerful threats on their own, while also simultaneously doing so when working together, which makes sense as the two stand users are already very well acquainted with each other.
Nice.
Anyways, I really loved how this fight went for Narancia. He's forced to put up with a lot of suffering at the hands of Clash and Talking Head, two stands that give him a lot of trouble at first, but luckily for him, Jono came in clutch and helped him get the victory that he needed. The teamwork from both parties was amazing to watch. Also, the ending scene of this fight was epic, especially in the anime. Next spot on the list we have Trish and Team Bucciarati versus Khan, Khan being the dude that died to Sex Pistols, but because Jono touched him to see if he was alive, his stand, Notorious B.I.G., attached itself to Jono without him knowing, which would then cause a massive fight on the plane, destroying almost everyone on Team Bucciarati, and then later fighting against the main heroine of this conflict being Trish, who has not only been forced to protect Team Bucciarati's only way of survival, but is also the only one that can deal with B.I.G. due to her stand ability. One of the things that I love about this fight is how Trish finally awakens her stand Spice Girl, and how it also inspires growth within her character, and by the end of the fight she becomes a really cool character who is no longer hesitant to openly be true to herself. Also, the way the stand acted as a mentor for Trish is very cool too. I really enjoyed the interactions between them. For me, the level of hype, tension and unease that was present in this fight was higher than any other one prior to it, which clearly showed that it did a great job of raising the stakes higher than any of the previous fights. Also, I really loved the part where Trish says arrivederci to B.I.G. when she finally manages to get rid of it, as it serves as a very cool homage to when Bucciarati said it at the end of the train fight. Holding the 5th spot on the list is Chocolata and Sekko versus Giorno, Bucciarati and Mister. This fight does a great job of introducing the most weird and infamous duo in part 5, that duo being Chocolata and Sekko, who have very powerful stand abilities both individually and when they both work together in sync as well. I love how the stakes of this fight got higher and higher the more it went on, as it goes from the conflict in the fishing village to it then escalating to 2 separate conflicts that happen in Rome, where Bruno and the others have to meet up with Polnareff, who also ends up in potential danger because of the dangerous duo, along with the population of Rome, which is caught in the crossfire of this massive battle. This fight is very long, but for the most part the pacing is still great, and the downtime moments in between the action thankfully don't bring it down, and the only time that the pacing felt too slow for me was during the moment where Sekko was attacking Bruno with his mud spears. But other than that, this fight was still fantastic. I really loved the mystery of Oasis and Green Day's abilities in the beginning, as it gave off this vibe of uneasiness, which was cool, and the scene where Bruno jumps down to beat up Sekko was really cool too. It would also kickstart Sekko's personal hatred of Bruno and their dynamic together, which I found to be very entertaining, as Sekko always seemed to have the upper hand over Bruno, who is half dead by this moment in the story, but because of his condition Bruno uses it to the best of his ability to defeat Sekko, and in the coolest way possible too. Also, despite Mister getting taken out really easily, I still love how he manages to still support Giorno with Sex Pistol number 5, and how even with that help Chocolate still manages to push Giorno to the brink of near death during this fight, which causes Giorno to despise him for his depraved nature. I also love how the two have stand abilities that share this very cool duality of opposing abilities, and the 7-page mood scene, which was peak as well. Overall, I really loved the creative use of every stand in this fight and how David Pro brought it to life in the anime. The next spot on the list is the final fight of part 5, which many assume is just the part where Gold Experience Requiem transforms and defeats King Crimson, which is incorrect, as the final fight itself is to chase for the arrow, where Bruno and the gang need to get it from Chariot Requiem before Diavolo does, but also within borrowed time before Chariot Requiem harms the living souls of everyone in Italy and potentially the entire world. I really love the unique approach to this final fight, and I don't really mind that it's more of a chase rather than a old school beatdown like the Dio versus Jojos fight, especially because of the way it's handled from start to finish, where you see everyone in Team Bucciarati, minus Fugo, working together and using their stands to the best of their ability in many creative ways to get the arrow, while Diavolo is also doing the same as well with his King Crimson. I also really like how Chariot Requiem establishes how powerful a Requiem stand can be, and how their power mainly revolves around the domination of living souls, something that is seen later again with Gold Experience Requiem with its return to zero technique. Now don't get me wrong, this fight definitely has its slow moments here and there, and the explanation behind Chariot Requiem's weakness is really convoluted, but despite the issues that I do have with this fight, the strengths of it are the reason why I have it ranked so high on this list, as for the most part the pacing is still great, and there are still a lot of amazing moments like the goofy and comedic scenes that came from them discovering that they swapped bodies, Trish stepping up to her father while also telling him that she no longer fears the fate that he's forced on her, which I think was a great conclusion to her character arc, along with everything else that happened right after, which was just amazing. And the final phase of this fight, where where Jojo gets the arrow and goes toe to toe with Diavolo is easily my favorite part of this entire final fight, as it is so satisfying to see Gold experience Requiem come to life and give Diavolo a dose of his own medicine. But there are also the really sad moments too that were very well done, like Naranja's death scene, seeing Jojo promise that he'll take him back home and not let anyone else hurt him, and Bucciarati's death scene too, which was very beautifully done. Seriously, there's a lot to love about this fight, but I think one of its best aspects for me was how it perfectly tied in all the main themes of Part 5's story, those themes being about the importance of relationships, fate, and also attaining the desired results through righteous actions. And what makes this even better is knowing that Diavolo himself is the antithesis of all these themes, which also helps to further strengthen the parallel and clash of ideologies between him and Jojo, especially in the final phase of this fight where Jojo mocks Diavolo for his actions, being superficial and rooted in only wanting the results. Lastly, I also really love how Gold Experience Requiem and King Crimson parallel each other with their abilities, as King Crimson erases the cause and keeps the effect with his time skip, while Gold Experience Requiem keeps the cause but removes the effect from reality with its return to zero technique, creating a duality of cause and effect between the two stands. Overall, while this fight definitely could have been better, it is still, to me, a fantastic fight, easily deserving of the 4th spot on this list. We are now officially entering the top 3 best fights of this list, starting off with Mr. and Bucciarati versus Pesci and Prosciutto. I love Pesci and Prosciutto, especially Prosciutto, as a lot of my favorite moments in this fight involve him, like the part where he tricks everyone with his stand ability to take down Mr., his fights with Bruno, and the scene of him shooting Mr., which is, to me, one of the coolest moments that I have ever seen in any anime period. But what I love even more is the dynamic between him and Pesci, and how Prosciutto helps Pesci grow by mentoring him on how to be more confident in himself and to have proper resolve, which not only gives Pesci great character development later in this fight, but it also makes him into an actual monster as well. The pacing of this fight was top notch, as it never felt like a drag to watch, even during the calm moments. I think this fight also does a great job of showing how creative, resilient, and really cool Bucciarati truly is as a leader and an overall gangster, without taking away how caring and protective he can be as well. The creative uses of old stands in this fight was very cool, unique, and overall very enjoyable to watch. Lastly, this fight probably has my favorite ending of all the fights due to the really cool confrontation between Bruno and Pesci, where Prosciutto is watching over his little brother, and the way Sticky Fingers ended Pesci combined with the Arrivederci by Bruno at the end. Overall, it was such a phenomenal way to end such an incredible fight. Holding the second spot on this list, we have Diavolo vs Bucciarati with the assistance of Jojo. Araki did a phenomenal job of establishing how terrifying and powerful King Crimson is in this fight, along with the reason why Diavolo himself has remained respected and lonely at the top for so long, as we are forced to see Bucciarati in a hopeless situation with no way of being able to assassinate or counterattack with his sticky fingers, almost dying in the fight, but thankfully he later musters up the courage and resolve later to get back up and escape with Trish, thanks to Jojo's help, which would allow Bruno to later outsmart Diavolo, as he effectively uses the limitations of King Crimson to his advantage and pulls off a believable escape in such a cool and epic fashion, while King Crimson looks on in embarrassment while Bruno mocks him for his overconfidence. Now look, I know this fight for the most part is very one-sided, but I don't care. To me it's phenomenal in almost every way. Mainly the anime version. The manga version is great, but the anime version is just way better, leagues better, especially because of the top tier art, animation and CGI work that they put into this fight. Also, one of the many things that I love about this fight is the dialogue and overall dynamic between Diavolo and Bruno, which is very personal. This fight overall is phenomenal and epic in every sense of the word. I've rewatched it so many times that I've lost count. It's just that damn good, but not good enough to take the #1 spot. Now the last fight that I talked about was phenomenal, near perfect even, but this fight between Risotto Nero and Vinegar Doppio with the assistance of Diavolo is something else, because it is rare that we ever get good villain versus villain fights in anime, especially on the level of this one, which starts off crazy and weird, but in the best way possible, giving a lot of suspense right off the rip, as Diavolo is forced to watch his weak and naive underboss deal with the most powerful assassin to ever enter his organization. When it came to this fight, Araki was really creative and went all out with it, and so did David Pro for the anime version, because the art and animation is the best that it's ever been in a Jojo fight, period. Nothing in any of the other seasons of Jojos even comes close, not even part 6. I love the clash between King Crimson and Metallica in this fight. I said before that the Gold Experience versus Babyface fight was like watching a fast-paced chess game in the form of a stand fight, which you could probably say about the last few fights that we've ranked on this list until now as well, but this fight was that on a whole nother level. The best part being where Doppio cuts off Risotto's foot after figuring out what his stand can do, thanks to the frog next to him. And speaking of Doppio, this fight was a great introduction to more of his character, and I also loved how he developed and became a more confident underboss throughout it too. His dynamic with Diavolo was also great, as he not only gives Doppio the tools that he needs to beat Risotto, but he also mentors him throughout the fight. But thankfully he doesn't influence Doppio too much, as every action Doppio takes is mostly done because of his own intuition. I also really love the dynamic the two share with Risotto, who's really aggressive but also very calm and observant as well. He's not my favorite minor villain by any means, but he's still a great one for sure, and I do wish that David Pro adapted his backstory that was mentioned in the manga, as I think that it would have been a really cool addition to the anime, but that's just me. Also, I really love the extra bit of backstory calling back to the Hitman team, along with the brutal and bloody nature of this fight, as I don't think a Jojo fight has ever been this intense and graphic before, and the way Risotto lost was a crazy mix of emotions for me, as he easily could have won the fight had Narancia not interfered, but at the same time it made sense as Doppio threw scalpels to get the victory in the first place, but not in the way that he originally planned, making what the fortune teller said about Diavolo always having luck on his side thanks to Doppio have a lot more credibility to it, especially with what would happen later in the story. But the way Risotto went out with his pride intact, trying to use Aerosmith as a last ditch effort to kill Diavolo, albeit to no avail, was still very cool to see. Seriously, this fight has it all: the presentation, the creativity, the emotional impact, the cool factor, and so much more. It is a masterpiece in every single aspect, and that is why I am officially ranking Risotto vs Doppio as the best fight in Jojo's Part 5 Golden Wind. And with that, every fight in Jojo Part 5 has been ranked. There are gonna be some fight placements that you disagree with on this list, so be sure to let me know your gripes with it and how you would rank all these fights down in the comments. And if you did enjoy this video and want to see more Jojo content from me, then be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. This is your boy MAMZYY signing out. Thank you for watching, take care and peace.